Good evening, members, and good evening and welcome to members of the public. And can I also welcome anyone watching on YouTube, but I assume there won't be many watching us this evening. They're probably going to find the football a little bit more interesting than our meeting. But I know quite a few people do watch it regularly, but whether they are tonight or not, I'm not sure. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Mrs Beavers, and she has no substitute. I've just had a message to say Councillor Bowers is stuck in traffic and will be here as soon as he can. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Wow, no one. That's very unusual. Item 3, minutes. I'm afraid the minutes of the 1st of November and the 15th of November are not available this evening. They will be coming to our next meeting. Oh, Councillor, it's all right. Don't worry. Just before, I've only got to item 3, Councillor. Do you have any declaration? No declarations, that's fine. Item 4, public question time. We have no general questions, and those that wish to make a statement make it prior to each application. So we'll go straight on to item 5, planning applications. The first application is 5A, application 21022414, St Dominic's Residential Home, London Road, Kelvedon. This can be found on pages 6 to 47, and I do have one speaker on this application, and that is Mr. Michael Smith, who is the agent. Mr. Smith, can I invite you to say, and can I just remind you, you have 3 minutes to make your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and on behalf of the applicant, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. This application seeks approval for the expansion of the existing facility at St Dominic's Care Home in Kelvedon, adding another 21 bedrooms and 7 close care bungalows to the 39 bedrooms that have been serving the village for many years. The care home has been nominated for Care Home of the Year 2022 by the National Gold Standards Framework Centre in End-of-Life Care, having maintained the Care Quality Commission's overall good standard since the current assessment system was introduced in 2016, and was recently re-accredited with the Quality Hallmark Award at Platinum status, having been the first care home in Essex to be awarded the highest standard. There is, inevitably, a long waiting list for a room at the care home. The new care home faces the existing building, standing entrance to entrance because they will be operated and managed as a pair. The gardens will be expanded to flow into the space around the new home, removing the boundary so that they read together and minimise the appearance of new and old parts to the site. The existing car park will be retained for the use by visitors, with a new access created by extending the cloisters into the site, so that there is a turning area that meets the latest standards for fire access and provides a new space for large vehicles to service both care homes, as well as relocating the staff parking out of sight. The two-storey building has been designed to respond to the appearance of the former Priory building in St Mary's Square and to create an appropriate relationship with the houses on London Road. The new entrance also serves the 7 close care bungalows. Close care housing is part of a national strategy to provide care and support services for older people who, through frailty or disability, are less able to live in their own homes without significant support, but are still sufficiently independent that they do not need the services offered by a care home. It also allows friends or couples who have different needs to continue to live together. For example, one is fit and able and the other is frail. The bungalows will be managed as part of the care home, with the residents able to use the staff and resources as and when necessary, depending on their needs. The bungalows are designed to the nationally described space standards and provided with a garden space and car parking in accordance with planning policy. They are laid out as a short cul-de-sac opposite the new care home, creating a back-to-back relationship with the houses on London Road and the paddock to the west. Technical issues such as flood risk have been addressed in the application for planning permission, and the Section 106 agreement will address the demand for healthcare, affordable housing and RAMS. The proposed scheme will deliver new high-quality care facilities for the village and expand the range of services on offer by providing for people who need an interim level of care. The development of the site will create a high-quality, aspirational, beautiful environment where elderly people can be happy and safe. As such, I trust you will concur with the case officer's recommendation and resolve to approve the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Thank you for attending and making your statement. I have no one else wishing to make a statement on this application, so we'll go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Lisa. Good evening. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This is a full application for the erection of a two-storey, 21-bed care home, together with 7 two-bed close care bungalows, together with associated parking, amenity areas and internal access road. And the site is St Dominic's Residential Home, London Road, Kelvedon. I'm just going to stop sharing because I'm having some issues with that screen. One moment. Apologies. So here is an aerial photograph. Here's an aerial photograph just showing Kelvedon, the village, and where the site relates. So we're talking about a site where my cursor is here, the existing residential care home is here, and the site lies adjacent to it. So you can see the proximity of that site to the high street. Another aerial photograph here just showing you the existing St Dominic's Residential Home. You can see the access off London Road here. And the site we're talking about today lies adjacent here and sort of this parcel of land here. Turning to the application site area, the application's outlined in red with blue land, other land that's in the applicant's ownership. Again, you can see the existing care home here and the existing access onto London Road, which would remain unaltered. Access to the site itself is from London Road and then the cloisters, where my cursor is here. Paddock land to the west here, but otherwise surrounded by residential land, residential use. The site lies outside of the conservation area, but adjacent to it. So again, this north-eastern boundary where my cursor is the edge of the conservation area. Turning to the site plan here, again, you can see the existing access into St Dominic's Care Home, the existing layout of parking provision, which remains unaltered. Access, as I've said, is via the cloisters here, and then this internal road to create an area of formalised parking, including visitor parking. You can see the care home here, a T-shaped building that would be 2-storey in height, has an element of flat roof, similar in form to the existing care home. Adjacent to the site are 7 detached bungalows with allocated parking to the side. In terms of these 7 bungalows, the application details that these are for close care bungalows where future occupiers will have 24-hour access to a dedicated member of staff within the main care home and general access to the staff and facilities within that care home. So officers have considered whether it would be reasonable and necessary to impose a condition or a legal agreement on any permission to restrict the age of the occupation of these units, and in this instance conclude that it would not meet the relevant test for when we can impose such a condition or agreement, and as such the application is considered on the basis that these 7 units could operate as market dwellings. Just whilst we're here looking at these 7 dwellings again, sort of consideration of affordable housing. So although the site only proposes 7 dwellings, the site is more than half a hectare and therefore it triggers a 40% affordable housing provision. This equates to a requirement of 2.8 affordable homes. Although on-site provision is usually the preferred approach, in this case a commuted sum payment in lieu of the affordable housing is considered to be more appropriate, and this is to be secured via a legal agreement. Just turning back to parking now, you can see that each of these dwellings, these bungalows, has 2 allocated parking spaces adjacent to them. There is also an additional 2 visitor parking spaces within the sort of that internal access road that we feel would serve those dwellings most appropriately. And then otherwise across the rest of the site, so looking at parking requirements for the existing care home and the proposed care home, across the rest of the site there are 28 spaces, so that includes these here, some visitor parking spaces here, the majority of these here, and some additional visitor spaces where my cursor is here. So those 28 spaces are proposed. It would be a shortfall of 10 spaces from the maximum provision in accordance with the adopted standards. However, the application has been submitted with a travel plan which seeks to reduce the reliance on the private car, and cycle parking will also be provided. The site also lies within proximity to bus and train provision, and there is a public car park in close proximity. And given these matters, it is considered that parking provision across the site is acceptable. So now just looking at some of the details of the care home and the dwelling types. We have got, here's the ground floor plan of the care home. So again, this T formation. You can see that the main entrance here, which equates to this area where my cursor is here, faces out onto the existing care home, and this provides a functional link between the two buildings. At ground floor, we've got 9 bedrooms and the dining room, and again, this dining room has doors out opening onto this sort of landscaped garden area. At first floor, there's a further 12 bedrooms and this communal residence lounge, again, which overlooks sort of this landscaped garden area. Just the roof plan here, showing a 2-storey scale of building with an element of flat roof. And turning to the proposed elevations, you can see that this is a buff brick. It's 2-storey, brick built with some banding detail and a slate roof. It's also got these sort of pitch roof features here, which just break up the eaves and add some interest. So here is the front elevation. So this is this glazed element that faces the existing care home. This would be this rear elevation C is the elevation you would see from that internal courtyard. And again, this elevation, side elevation B, is if you were standing where my cursor is here, so within the sort of formalised parking area. Here are the French doors, double doors facing out onto the open space. And this elevation here would be the rear, the view really from the cloisters. So plot one is this unit here where my cursor is. It's a buff brick property with a slate roof. There are no objections to the roofing material, but officers consider that a lighter brick is required to be more in keeping with the materials in the locality, and this is to be secured by condition. In terms of the design, you can see this sort of little pitch roof feature there that breaks the eaves, sort of ties back into the design feature in the existing care home. Floor plans there, just showing a fairly standard 2-bed unit. So, apologies. Unit 7 now is this unit we're talking about here. So a red brick and a slate roof. Again, no objection to those materials. And as the members will have seen within the committee report, there are some concerns in terms of future amenity for occupiers within this unit. So here on the floor plan, you can see sort of the siting of the bedrooms. So the bedrooms would be along where my cursor is here. So the properties will have both of these bedrooms facing out into the access road and the parking areas for staff, and occupiers would be impacted by general noise and disturbance from the comings and going of employees. In addition, there's 2 visitor parking spaces located alongside it here where my cursor is. And again, this would exacerbate the harmful impact to amenity, so that those parking spaces lie along sort of this elevation, front door and that flank bedroom window. Although this is a matter which relates to only one dwelling, future occupiers would be aware, it is a matter that does weigh against the proposal to a moderate degree. Bungalow C is plot 2, so we're talking about this unit here, again buff brick slate roof, and again 2-storey. Type D is units 3, 4, 5 and 6, so the rest of those units as you go round, again that buff brick that we're securing to be a lighter material, and the slate. And there's the floor plan. The application does require the removal of 7 individual trees, 6 groups and 1 hedgerow. The majority of these, as we can see here, are located within the area within the allocation site identified within the local plan. So this is a residential allocation site here, so there's always been an expectation that those trees would be removed. None of the trees to be removed are protected, and they largely consist of mixed vegetation cover of self-sown trees and ornamental planting. While the loss of these trees is regrettable, the loss of amenity is largely within the confines of the site itself, and hedgerowing is to be retained along this boundary here, H1 as we can just see on that plan, and there'll be further planting throughout the site, and there, on this basis we feel the loss can be justified. Turning to the proposed landscape plan now, again you can see this existing hedgerow is to be retained, that H1 as I just previously identified. This will be strengthened and supplemented with native hedge planting. Across the site, some evergreen hedge will be planted, so this sort of lighter green colour that provides some uniformity to the planting approach across the site. In addition, 45 trees will be planted across the site, so along this boundary, some street trees through, and just generally sort of across the site. These will consist of field maple, birch, rowan and pink cherry. The hedging that's going to be in will be relatively established, so that we'll be going in at a height of 90 to 120 centimetres, and the trees 2.7 to 3 metres. Just turning to some photographs here. This is a photograph taken from the existing access, looking at the existing parking and care home. So you can see the existing materials, render, brick and a slate roof. This is where my cursor is, where the planting is. This is the area of planting to be removed, and this is the siting for the care home. Again, it's probably quite difficult to see here, but this is the area for the care home, so existing sort of gardens for the care home, but the majority of these are to be removed. Another photograph here, so you can see the existing informal parking provision for staff and visitors, and the siting for the care home will be here, so some of these are the trees to be removed. Photograph here, just looking up the cloisters to the access for the site, care home to be sited on the right hand side, and those residential bungalows to the left. A view now looking from within the site, so you can see the existing access we saw on the previous slide, looking towards the siting for the care home. So again, these trees and others are to be removed. Now a view looking to where plot 1 would be, and sort of as the plot 1, 2 and 3 sort of extend along here, this is the planting to be removed. Another view of that, so this sort of planting to be removed here, and the rest of those bungalows sited around here. So in terms of the planning balance, the adverse impacts are the conflict with the development plan in relation to the 7 bungalows. So the site is outside of the defined village envelope for Kelvedon and is within a countryside location. We consider there would be adverse impact to the amenity for future occupiers of Unit 7, who will be impacted by general noise and disturbance from the coming and goings of vehicles. The application does result in the removal of 7 individual trees, 6 groups and 1 hedgerow, although I've identified it's largely within the allocation site area. Again, the loss is regrettable, but with the retained and replacement planting, this loss can be justified. Just sort of picking up a point really in terms of the parking at this stage, in terms of sort of looking, sort of weighting adverse impacts. So as detailed within the report, the development will result in a shortfall of parking for the care home element. However, for the reasons set out in the report and as I have discussed today, this is considered acceptable. So parking is not considered to be a matter to which any adverse impact is attributed. Looking at the benefits of the site, compliance with the development plan in terms of the care home element. So this does lie within the defined development boundary and is a residential housing allocation site within the adopted local plan. The application does result in the delivery of market housing, and a financial contribution would be secured towards affordable housing. The site is considered to be in a sustainable location, so good access to services and facilities, and there would be economic and social benefits. So in terms of the overall planning balance, having regard to the adverse impacts and the benefits, and having regard to the requirements of the NPPF as a whole, officers conclude that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the adverse impacts, and our recommendation this evening is that planning permission be granted subject to a Section 106 legal agreement to secure healthcare, affordable housing and habitat regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you for a very detailed overview of the application. Members, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. I think on balance this is an acceptable proposal, and indeed could be a useful one if the proposed uses of the 7 bungalows are kept to what we anticipate they will be. I mean, pointed out it's a sustainable location. It is an allocated site for residential development, so it ticks that box too. can't see any harmful effect on the adjacent conservation area. There are no sort of heritage complications, and I think that it fits in relatively well with the sort of the existing development down the general sort of street scene, and I think it's fairly clear that overall the benefits outweigh any adverse impacts on sort of the tilted balance. So I'm happy to support the proposal, Chair.
Are you supporting or moving? Do you mean? Sorry, I missed.
I'll be happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Does it find a seconder before I move on? It does in two places. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Mrs Wilson?
Yes, I did. Just quite a trivial question, really. Can someone tell me what a travel plan is? Referred to in this 11.8.5.
I'm going to do that.
Thank you. So the travel plan's been submitted, so it outlines, it's a way to encourage staff at the site from the existing care home, which currently doesn't have a travel plan, and the proposed, and any people working within the bungalows as well, to sort of seek to use more. It's to reduce the reliance on the private car, really, so encouraging other means of travel, car sharing, those sort of issues.
Yeah, I do have a problem with that because it's probably, I'm not too good at this, but I would think it's probably about a mile to the nearest railway station, and I can't see many of the elderly people that take up residence in this care home are going to be able to walk that distance. And as we know, the buses are now much more irregular than they were.
Problem is, there's already a care home on the site, and the residents must be able to walk, and the ones in the bungalow that are going to be more fitter are going to have parking spaces and will probably have cars, Councillor. So, yeah,
I was just to say, just so noting the point, obviously a primary part of the travel plan will be focused on the employees of the site who would be travelling to and from the site. So that's obviously a big element here in the generator really for the travel demand. So it's, as Lisa said, it's just encouraging those ways in terms of...
It's still a long way to walk to the station.
But it would be within a walking distance. So, but note the point. But I just wanted to make the point about the employees.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I don't know if the officer mentioned it, but there have been previous attempts to build additional units on this site. A 21-bed unit was refused and appeal dismissed in 2008, and then a 2020 application was withdrawn. So first question is, why isn't the appeal decision in the papers? Is that because it was so long ago, or is there some other reason? Second point I would raise is, whilst I'm going to support this application because I think the accommodation is needed, it's interesting that the council allocated the site for development knowing all those trees were there, and actually the loss is very significant. I know the site very well. It's not an interest, but a relative of mine was in there for a number of years, nearly 2 decades ago, so I know the site, and that is going to lose a very substantial part of the garden and the landscaping. So second question is, why did the council allocate that knowing that there would be that level of losses? Third question is the council satisfied, are officers satisfied about the amount of garden that's residual? So obviously all the individual new units have got their own gardens. But I wonder if we could have the plan back up. To me, the garden area is very significantly reduced. You've sort of got the courtyard areas around the 2 main blocks. But are residents expected to use the more distant area of green space? And I know it's a care home and some are frail, but particularly on nice days, that ability to be able to get outside. And with all the extra people living there, I'm just wondering, is enough garden space provided? I totally agree with Councillor Wilson's comment about the distance to the railway station. It's very nearly a mile. That is quite a walk. I think some people might do it in terms of staff, but it is stretching it. Noted that the health contribution is a glorious £9,000. That's really, for given the nature of the and the likely additional health issues that some of the residents may have, that's not going to touch. They're not even going to paint the sides, let alone touch them. But I know that's a generic problem we have.
Something we can do, yeah.
So I'm going to support this because I think it's needed, and generally, but I'm just curious about these sort of planning points around the allocation of the trees. Thank you, and the garden.
Yes, whoever would like to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So just taking the points in turn. So the point about the allocation of the site, it's not something we can really answer here tonight because as part of the local plan process, we have the local plan subcommittee that is responsible for the allocation of sites and the review of the local plan. So it's gone through the council's local plan, which was adopted early this year, has gone through that process, and as part of that, the sites have been selected and have been subject to scrutiny. But we do have the situation arise that if we've got an allocated site, there is a general acceptance, obviously, that development is going to go on there. So I haven't been involved in that process. That's a separate team that looks, there's obviously the planning policy team that looks at individual sites, and there's a separate committee of this council that obviously scrutinises and makes the ultimate decision in terms of that. So I think that's my response on that one. As to the 2008 appeal, I think really what the approach would usually be, so if we've got a recent appeal decision, so you'll see later on in the agenda pack this evening, we've got a more recent appeal decision relating, obviously that's clearly material to the decision. We've got a situation, obviously, given the passage of time, that things have moved on. This is pre-MPPF. This is obviously, the council's new adopted local plan. And as Lisa's explained, the context of this, given the allocation of the site. So I think where we have a planning application history or appeal history that we feel is pertinent and material to the application under consideration, we would usually flag that within the report. But I think the passage of time in this one means that actually it has fallen slightly by the wayside, even though it was a dismissed appeal. Obviously, the planning policy context here has moved on since that application was considered, all those years ago. So I think that's that point. And then perhaps on the garden point, if I could just refer back to Lisa just on that in terms of the garden sizes and the residual areas.
If I could just briefly say, I'm particularly interested in that bit right at the top of the plan. Is that intended to be part of the garden for the two larger blocks?
Piece of the other side of the hedge.
I can't read the text.
Sorry, here.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's. I don't think it's going to be formal gardens. So the formal gardens that will remain for the care home are these two sort of existing, well kept, well landscaped areas that are existing, and then sort of a very formal garden here. This would just remain sort of as it is at the moment, which is sort of, I don't want to say paddock land, but sort of laid to grass really. And there's an access to this sort of existing outbuilding here.
So then my question is, thank you, are officers content that those relatively small residual areas are enough?
Yeah, and that's a fair question, thank you. So yeah, officers have visited the site and are content that these sort of, main three areas for the care home, admittedly, the residential have their own, obviously, separate residential curtilage, but these three areas would provide high quality amenity for future occupiers.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you. Yes, there are obviously substantial benefits to this proposal with the provision of a care home and the additional housing, and I do like the design, particularly of the bungalows actually. But I am concerned about Unit 7. I think when you look back at the plans, there were originally going to be 9 bungalows, and it's now been reduced to 7. And the 2 other bungalows we're going to bid on that bit of open space that Councillor Abbott referred to. Obviously, those 2 bungalows have been removed for some reason, but the Unit 7 is still in the position it was when those other 2 bungalows were there. And I am concerned about the orientation of that bungalow. I'm particularly concerned about car headlights, actually, with staff manoeuvring in and out of their parking spaces next to the bungalow, and also vehicles accessing the site. And I think those car headlights will shine straight into people's bedrooms. So that does bother me, and I was wondering whether it would be possible to somehow or other attach the condition that bungalow is reorientated. I mean, there is adequate space. The other concern I do have, I mean, I note the comments about the travel plan, but I think shortfall of parking spaces for staff is quite an issue, really. I'm not sure. I mean, we all know that care home staff aren't paid a huge amount of money. Are they able? Will they use a car park where they have to pay? Will they want to access by train? Everybody says trains are so expensive these days. I mean, are you satisfied that level of shortfall of parking spaces, given the fact there is unused space on the site, is satisfactory? Just those 2 points, please. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. If I can perhaps just come back on the first point, just on the design, and then perhaps if I can pass to Lisa just to go through the shortfall of the parking again. So on the design, Lisa just put the layout plan back up. So Unit 7 is the one at the end of the access road. Thank you, Lisa. On the end there, so we've kind of highlighted really within the report and the assessment. That's probably, in terms of the design and layout, it was a concern for us, given the fact it is on the turning point. You've got the parking adjacent, and exactly those sorts of points, Councillor Parker, in terms of the potential impact on amenity. Obviously, the assessment we've made within the report is that assessing the scheme as a whole, that's an element that does weigh against the proposal, but in the overall assessment, we've considered, obviously on balance, that the application is acceptable. We wouldn't be able to, I don't think, impose a condition about reorientating that dwelling. I think if members felt really strongly about that aspect of the proposal, it would obviously be within members' gift to defer consideration of the application, ask officers to go back to speak to the applicant about either the specific design, or if there was a concern about that unit, to actually go back and look at the proposal. But I think in terms of reorientating it, I think I'd been comfortable just covering that off by condition, because it does go to the layout and the detailed design of the site. So I think so, given the extent of the change. I think if members felt strongly about that, I think we would want to get the clarity in terms of what the proposal is before members made a decision. That's obviously within members' gift, but as we've acknowledged, that is an aspect of the proposal that we were a little bit uncomfortable over, but it needs to be considered as an application as a whole. And obviously, you've got the care home here, which weighs, does weigh very heavily in favour of the application and where we've got to. So that would be my response, I think, on the design point. So I'd probably steer members away from a condition. But as I said, the option is there if members do feel really uncomfortable to consider deferral. On the parking, perhaps if I could just ask Lisa to come back on that point. Obviously, it's a point we've carefully considered and obviously have regard to the location, but I'll just get Lisa just perhaps to clarify the figures again.
Thank you. Yes, that's helpful. Yeah, in terms of the parking, officers have sort of made that assessment, acknowledged that shortfall. We've then looked at what the provision of public transport is in the locality. So the site's 230 metres away from bus stops on the high street, and we've had a look at the services that those buses do serve. So it's quite wide-ranging in terms of Witham, including the rail station, Colchester, Chelmsford, and the villages that serve them. So we feel that would enable staff and visitors to use the buses to access the sites. Obviously, we've already spoke about the proximity of the railway station, so that's 0.8 miles distance, and again, that does provide regular services to a number of destinations, again, to enable staff and visitors to reach the site other than in the private vehicle. In addition, we've added a condition regarding a requirement for cycle storage, so any staff that could cycle to the site could do and could adequately store their bicycle. And there is a public car park in proximity to the site, so I think that's a distance. Do I say in the report? Bear with me. It's within very close proximity, so we feel like cumulatively, taking in all those factors, that we feel the parking provision on site is acceptable in this case.
Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Two things. Condition 22, can I just ask officers about the strategy for an electric vehicle charging being submitted and improved. I'd like to know roughly what that means. Does that mean that all the bungalows will have one and there's some for the visitors and car parking? Because it sounds a bit vague, so I'd like detail on that, please. And the other thing is that actually the design, and I agree with Councillor Parker about the quality and especially the flexibility this is going to give for different levels of care for residents there, I think is really important. Like the fact that the existing is already a high quality with the various awards that have been given to that, but I think it's a great extension, and I do welcome the fact that there is a biodiversity net gain to this overall site with the increase in trees and reinforcing of the hedging, and the fact that the trees are going to be distributed throughout the site, and especially to note that they are going to be not whips or anything like that, but substantial when they're planted to 2.7 to 3 metres tall. So that's immediately going to help the whole site immediately. Thank you. But I welcome back on the EV charging. And also, I just wondered if we could have an informative, please. I know you mentioned about the cycle store. Taking into account the sustainable transport aims and going forward with active travel, would the developer be thinking about not only EV charging for cars, but also for e-bikes going forward? Because that could be a significant mode of transport for those getting to and from as a workplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In regards to condition 22, the EVC strategy, we've imposed that wording and you said it's vague, but I think the reason we put a strategy on rather than being very prescriptive in asking for it per unit, I think is because just trying to understand the nature of the use really. So that allows us flexibility to require one for each dwelling, and then whatever amount we feel is appropriate for the site for the care home element. So it just allows that bit more flexibility and discussion to be had really, rather than very prescriptive as you might get on a straightforward residential scheme. In terms of the informative for the e-bikes, I think that would be happy to add an informative on that, and again that might be something that would come forward through the travel plan, and there's a condition obviously on there for the travel plan, so again it might just draw back into that as well.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Mann, are you as the mover, are you happy with that informative? And Councillor Wilson as the seconder, are you happy? Yes. Does anyone else wish to? Oh, Councillor Mrs. Spray, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be very, very brief. I'm happy to support this. Pleased to hear that the existing care home has been nominated for quite significant awards. I think that bodes very well. It says quite a lot about how the care home is managed at the moment, so well done to them for that. Overall, I think this is very good. Yes, the shortfall in parking spaces is a pity, but it is a sustainable location in terms of being walkable to the railway station. And I appreciate Councillor Wilson's concerns that staff, particularly if they are working at night, may not want to walk to the station, but you know, it is a classed as a walkable distance, and so you know that is what it is. And the orientation of Unit 7, I'm going to assume that at some stage during the planning process, the officers and the applicant have discussed this, and that if it could be reorientated, then it would have been. So I'm going to assume that it's the way it is because there really is no particularly sensible alternative for it. You know, I think on its own that is personally for me not enough for us to defer the whole thing this evening. And all one can say is that future occupants of that unit will be aware of that and be made aware of that potential issue with car lights and so on, you know, before they choose to move into the unit. So all in all, I think very good, very happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No one else? Well, it has been moved and seconded. It's been moved by Councillor Mann and seconded by Councillor Mrs. Wilson with the additional informative. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lisa, for all your answers to questions. Now brings us on to item 5B, application 21-03121 full. Deer Park View, Land Rear, Greentree Road, Great Parkfield. This item can be found on pages 48 to 91, and I do have speakers on this application. And the first person who wishes to make a statement is Mrs. Hilary Simpkins, for she's speaking on behalf of the residents of Deer Park View. And I invite Mrs. Simpkins, and I remind you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. We consider 56 dwellings in relation to the size of this plot and the village to be excessive. Further development will cause additional strain on overstretched public services. We witnessed the traffic flow in and out of Deer Park View and are shocked by the unrealistically low associated vehicles figures estimated by Crowdace Consultants in their application. Proposed access via the existing entrance from Braintree Road linking Phase 1 with Phase 2 through an existing narrow side turning flanked either side by numbers 6, 8 and 10 is wholly unsuitable. Associated vehicle noise, fumes and light pollution would affect homes previously built by the developer with little regard for those residents' safety and well-being. Cycle and footpaths should be the only link which are already marked on the plans. The speed limit in Braintree Road approaching Great Parkfield at the junction with Deer Park View is 60 miles an hour. Should this development be approved, we would request a separate entrance further up Braintree Road with clear warning signs beyond, thus slowing traffic on approaching into the village. We agree with the executive summary and consider the close proximity of new houses to existing properties to be unacceptable, depriving residents of the peace, privacy and space they previously enjoyed. Rapid escalation of climate change brings increasing concern, and we question the wisdom of building a large development on precious farmland with the associated negative impact this would bring on delicate ecological balance. We believe that soil on the proposed plot reaches higher saturation levels than calculated during spates of continuous heavy rain. Resulting stormwater flows into the unmaintained ditch in front of Deer Park View and existing drains, emerging again to pour over the road towards the Bardfield Centre and downhill to the village centre. Existing drains are already struggling to cope. Excavation of the site terrain could exacerbate this problem. We wonder if required planning of native trees and shrubs along the entire boundary of existing Phase 1 properties is complete. This was a condition for granting approval and may have assisted in alleviating the problem, reducing the knock-on effect experienced in the village. We have read reports of similar occurrences at other Crowdace sites, which puts into question the reliability of all their data. In the wider context, it is clear that further development of this site would put further strain on all elements of the existing infrastructure of our historic village and beyond. Road networks serving this rural area consist of narrow, winding, unlit lanes crossing historic single-track bridges requiring frequent repair, largely due to damage from heavy vehicles. These bridges were not designed to accommodate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Simpkins. The next person wishing to make a statement is Mrs. Janice Chappell. She's also speaking on behalf of the residents of Deer Park View.
I'm a resident of Deer Park View whose property backs onto the fields in which the planning application affects. Along with everyone's objections, of which there are many and quite rightly so, for myself, and I believe I speak for everyone, especially those backing onto this land, most importantly is the French drain and bund which now runs along the back of our properties, which absolutely must remain in place and maintained. I'm sure everyone here is aware of the use of the French drain and bund. However, for anyone who is not on Zoom, it is installed to primarily drain groundwater that is trapped in the ground away towards specific area soak away, in this case away from our rear gardens and homes. Having only been in our property for a few months, back in 2020, due to extremely bad saturation resulting from torrential rain, this situation was dealt with as a matter of urgency. In fact, on the same Sunday morning, the trench was dug by the landowner, having been contacted by a resident at that time who actually worked for Crowdace. Within a few weeks of consultations between Crowdace and the landowner, the French drain and bund was fully installed, and thankfully for all of us and the village, in fact, this solved the problem and has safeguarded against further flooding. Therefore, this must remain to avoid any further repercussion. The French drain and bund is situated along the back of our existing estate, 3 to 4 metres from our boundary fence. Therefore, should any sort of planning ever be considered, it must be taken into account, and this area must remain as green area and planted as such as a walkway or similar. Having said that, Crowdace have still not fulfilled their obligation along the back of our properties from the original planning on our estate, which was to plant trees and shrubs along the whole back boundary fence, and that was part of their acceptance of the original planning. I believe this has been addressed by Great Bardfield Parish Council. Had they have done this, as agreed and stipulated, we would have had a lot more wildlife returning than we have, as the trees and shrubs would have started to establish and our birds and wildlife would feel safe to return. Lastly, Crowdace have given no consideration whatsoever when drawing up these new plans to the existing purchasers of Deer Park View at all. And let's not forget, we only purchased them only 2 years previously on the understanding these 37 original properties were built on their own standalone estate and with all boundaries remaining intact. Should this planning application be granted, which I sincerely hope it does not, it would be turning a small, beautiful development into one large housing estate of almost 100 homes, as primarily seen and suitable for a large town, and definitely not a small historical village. And in turn, 56 further homes would bring with it 100 plus cars. That's without deliveries and refuse collections. With this and all previous objections in mind, please can this be refused?
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Jackal. The next person wishing to make a statement is Councillor Ian Graham, and he's speaking on behalf of Great Bardfield Parish Council. Good evening.
Good evening. Our objection to this development is based on recent consultations with the wider community and consideration by the Parish Council's Planning Subcommittee and a full Parish Council with input from our Neighbourhood Plan Group. Our emerging neighbourhood plan has taken full account through a recent survey of the views of the whole community in order to appropriately plan future development of this historic village to ensure a sustainable community supported by an adequate infrastructure. This proposed development is contrary to our emerging neighbourhood plan and to local and national planning policy and guidelines. It lies outside the village envelope established by the BDC, whose policy states that new development will be confined to areas within the town development boundaries and village envelopes. Disregarding this established planning boundary would be in contrary to policy and undermine protection afforded by all town boundaries and village envelopes. BDC's local plan states areas outside the development boundaries are considered to be countryside. We emphasise that the nature and scale of the proposed development constitutes a major planning application in the context of a village the size of Great Bardfield. We consider that such a development does not meet sustainability criteria and will create an unbalanced community. We raised this in our objection to the first phase of this development, which is now complete, which has resulted in the pressure on local infrastructure and services. Our school is full, with no capacity to expand. Local medical services are stretched. There has been increased flooding in and around the site, and public transport is insufficient to ameliorate the extra journeys such a development would inevitably create. If this application was approved, adjacent to the recent development at Deer Park, the two together would create an extensive urban-style development of almost 100 dwellings on greenfield land at the edge of a historic village. This is entirely unsustainable in a village of this nature, would increase the number of properties by more than 10%. The Great Bardfield Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan, July 2020, commissioned by the BDC, described the established setting of Great Bardfield as overwhelmingly rural, integral to the understanding of the history of the village. It is nestled down into the valleys of the River Pant and the Bardfield Brook. Appraisal values view into and out of Bardfield, and proposed development will have a negative impact on all these views. The village has limited full-time employment opportunities, with many of the jobs being largely part-time. It will therefore mean an exodus to towns and major service centres, resulting in limited, if any, sustainable economic benefits to the parish. Roads serving the village are classified B or lower, some passing through other villages and over ancient narrow bridges. Parking and traffic through the village are already a significant issue, and the increased car movements of residents, visitor and delivery vehicles as a result of the proposed development will be seriously detrimental. We urge Braintree District Council to refuse this application. To approve an application that is contrary to their own planning policy and emergency local plan is to make a mockery of the planning process. Many years of work and attention to the plans by the council and the commitment to the people of Great Barfield and their community. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. The final person wishing to make a statement on this application is Mr. Tom Pike. He is the agent.
Good evening, Chair and members, and many thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of the proposals in front of you. My name is Tom Pike, Director of Planning at Lampro, and I'm speaking on behalf of my client and applicant, Crowders Homes. Crowders is a well-established regional developer who delivered the well-received adjacent development at Deer Park View, granted an appeal in April 2016. We would like to respond to a number of elements referenced in the committee report. Firstly, Crowders is committed to entering into a legal agreement to secure the financial contributions and other matters referenced in the proposed second reason for refusal. The absence of a draft agreement at this stage is due to a lack of officer willingness to engage in drafting such agreement for a scheme they are opposing. It would be entirely possible for you to resolve to grant planning permission subject to legal agreement being entered into. Secondly, some of the points in the committee report are factually incorrect. For example, the rear gardens wholly comply in the requirements of the Essex Design Guide. The dwellings which back onto Deer Park View are less than 1 metre from complying with the same guide, not the figure stated in the report. Thirdly, elements of contention are largely subjective. Our position is that the streets are lined with trees, the approach to car parking is appropriate, achieves the required standards and reflects the adjacent development, given its close physical and design relationship, and that the affordable homes are tenure blind and mirror the approach in the adjacent development. There is no discernible visual difference between the market and affordable homes, and a number of registered providers are comfortable with their location on the site in terms of future management. Fourthly, the council not currently being able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply means that the presumption is to grant planning permission. This is unless any impacts of doing so would be significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Our contention is that this simply has not been established. Finally, the benefits of the proposals have been downplayed and the perceived impacts heightened. There are no objections from any statutory consultees. In addition to delivery of market and affordable homes, the site being sustainably located and economic and social benefits created, the development will also achieve a biodiversity net gain of over 50% in terms of hedgerow units. Significant landscaping and trees are proposed. All homes are to be highly energy efficient, and areas of public open space and informal play are to be provided. Overall, the cumulative benefits of the proposals demonstrably outweigh the limited number of adverse impacts. We therefore strongly ask members to reconsider the officer recommendation and move to grant planning permission subject to entering into a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. Thank you for your presentation. That brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement on this application. We're now going to Mel. Thank you, Mel. Sorry. For the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, members. So the application before you this evening is for full planning permission for the erection of 56 dwellings with associated works. Those works include access, the internal road network, associated highway works, hard and soft landscaping, formal and informal open space, vehicular, cyclist and pedestrian infrastructure, utilities and drainage infrastructure, car and cycle parking and refuse storage. And the site is at the rear of Deer Park View in Great Bardfield. So this first slide shows you the location of the application site. So much has been said about the site that was allowed on appeal, which is this development here, that wraps around the proposed access off of Braintree Road. So this is Deer Park View, and then you've got existing older properties within the Great Bardfield in Bendilows. And then the remainder of Great Bardfield is located to the north of this site location plan. The next slide shows you an aerial photograph. I thought this was a useful photograph to show you the context of the application site, it being agricultural farmers' fields. And then you can make out this is the development that was allowed on appeal with its access off of Braintree Road. So the next slide shows the proposed layout, which has been described within the officer report, and I'll just go into detail here. So access would utilise the existing access off of Braintree Road through the first portion of Deer Park View, and then running down between existing properties and then into broadly kind of 2 blocks of development, and then carrying on to the slimmer section of the application site where development is proposed on just one side with the road to the east. The next slide show you some proposed street elevations in context. So across the site, all the dwellings are proposed to be 2-storey. And then we've got a second slide there. I've got a number of slides that show some of the proposed dwelling types. I haven't provided all of them, but I've got a selection here as a flavour for you. So this is house type 1, which is a detached property. And then we've got house type 7, which is another detached property. House type 11, which is a semi-detached property. And then we've got the plans here for double and single garages. This is the plan that's been put forward for the landscaping strategy. So you can see along the new boundary of the site, there is trees proposed. There's an area of public open space within this larger portion of the site, and in the slimmer section, this is where there would be an area of a trim trail and play equipment for children, and a walkway that would then be utilised by dog walkers or anyone wishing to take a stroll through the development. The next slide shows you some photographs. So this photograph here is looking along the northern boundary of the site. So these existing properties to the left here are within Deer Park View, and so this is the existing boundary of the village. Again, this is then looking again at those properties within that new development that was allowed on appeal, and so this is the existing boundary of the village of Great Bardfield, and the application site sits in the foreground of that photograph. This photograph looks to the northeast across the site. So again, you could just make out here, these are the new houses that were built after appeal, and then this gives you an idea of the landscape that then sits as it currently appears as agricultural and farmland. This photograph here is taken from the south, so you can just about make out there along the horizon the roofs of the existing properties within Deer Park View. So this is a view taken when looking north across from the south, but looking north across this application site. And lastly, this photograph here is looking down looking southeast along the boundary towards the Blue Egg, which I must say I didn't realise what the Blue Egg was until I did some research. I couldn't work out what a blue egg was, well, apart from a duck egg, I suppose. But so this looks this would be part of the application site, and along beyond this tree line here is where Braintree Road runs to the south towards the Blue Egg development. So in summary, it's a full application for 56 dwellings. The site does lie outside the village boundary, and therefore there is then a conflict with adopted policy LPP1. The site would deliver 22 affordable units, and officers do consider that there would be economic benefits during the construction and thereafter. However, officers have come to the view that there would be harm to the character of the area by creating an explicit new urban edge to the village of Great Bardfield. Further harm would be caused by the poor layout without tree-lined streets, and then the unacceptable relationships between properties. There is also then the lack of the Section 106 agreement. Therefore, when considering the planning balance and having regard to the adverse impacts and benefits outlined above, officers have concluded that the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. Consequently, the application is recommended for refusal. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you. Members. Councillor Abbott.
Before I speak to this, Madam Chairman, could the officer address the issues which the agent raised? Because there seems to be quite a gap between what the report says about garden sizes and distances, back-to-back distances, and he's basically saying that there's no problem, and the report says yes, there is a problem. So could you just clarify that, please?
Let me just go to that section within the committee report. So if we turn to page 66 of the agenda, there is a section at the bottom half of that page, paragraph 11.2.15, which deals with the Essex Design Guide and the standards that they have for gardens. Within there, I mean, I have measured every single garden as part of the assessment that I would have carried out, and the conclusion there is that 11 out of the 56 plots, 11 of them have substandard gardens, and then 8 of those would be those allocated to the affordable units. I haven't got a table that have got all the garden areas plotted out, but that's what's stated within the committee report, and I did do those measurements when I was doing my assessment of the application. And again, I think there is in the preceding paragraph, so 11.2.14, it talks about back-to-back distances, and this is particularly to do with the back-to-back distances between the houses in the smaller section of the site and the dwellings in Bendilows Road, and particularly with those back-to-back distances and how close they are to the rear boundaries with those properties. If I go back to the layout plan, I can. So if it's these distances here, so particularly these properties here that are very close to the rear boundaries of the existing properties in Bendilows Road, and also then this property at the top. So it's those ones that we have concerns with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. It partly does. I think just a suggestion on the garden size, it would have been helpful to have the exact measurements, because sometimes when we have reports and it says, you know, 2 metres under or 3 metres under, that's different to it being 20 under. So thank you for that. So in sort of strategic planning terms, I think one of the concerns I've got is the officer report says it's creating a new urban edge to the village. It's almost like an unnatural shape. What was allowed on appeal does square off the edge of the village. Then you've got sort of a block coming south, and then this rather strange bit coming round, and you can imagine another slice. That's a slice, and you can imagine another slice in another 5 or 10 years. It's got that feel to it, And clearly it's not an allocated site. And I know that our policies on that don't carry the weight they should do due to this housing lands. I won't say what I feel about it. I know many others do. The housing land supply situation, but I think it's an unnatural, apart from anything else, as well as an unnatural shape apart from anything else in terms of creating a new boundary. Another point raised was this business of. Well, sorry, you've answered the agent's points, and obviously if it goes to appeal, you're happy to stand by those. That was my concern. You know, there's measurements are measurements, aren't they, if they're done properly? But another point I wanted to raise was the mix of the housing. So I know this isn't a reason why we're refusing this, but the market housing are very much towards the larger end. You've got 10 threes, 11 4-beds, and 4 5s, which is significantly weighted towards that end. So yes, I think all in all, we have got grounds to refuse it. If it goes to appeal, we'll have to see what happens. But I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor. Does it find a seconder before I move on? Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Spray, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, could you please just, for clarification of everybody, identify where the cluster of the affordable homes are on the plan, please? Which?
So they run along here. So it's these properties here. They turn the corner, and then there are some along this bit here. So they're clustered in this this corner here.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate Mr. Pike's comment during his presentation that they are tenure blind, but for me that's not really the point. As a rule, I think this committee, when we have, developments with affordable homes, we like to see them not in one lump, if I can put it that way. We prefer to see them spread throughout the site, and really there should not be any difference between the affordable homes and the market homes in terms of anybody coming onto the site and looking at it. We like to have the same high standard, but I think the fact that they are clumped together is not particularly good. I note that we've got 2 reasons for refusal here in the agenda, but reason 1, I've actually picked out, I think, 5, possibly 6 reasons within that paragraph for refusal, from the unsatisfactory garden sizes, the siting of the affordable dwellings, and the fact that in officers' view it's overpopulated, it's trying to get too much onto the site. So I do think there are sound reasons for the refusal, and because of that I'm happy to second the motion to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with that. I mean, we've backed off sustainability as reason for refusal, and given the evidence of the appeal decision landscape, heritage doesn't really apply. So we are left with, I think, the character of the area. That this does not sit well at all with the character of the area. It does advance urbanisation into the countryside, and this is, one of the more rural approaches to the village, and much prized, and I think that alone is a sufficient ground for refusal.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Just to add a small point, it's rather disappointing to hear from the residents that there was originally an intention to have a planted boundary along Deer Park View and never ever planted. And it's not probably not a planning reason, but one does question when a developer doesn't carry out original promises and the first boss of the development, whether they're going to carry out the rest. So I just wanted to I found that quite disappointing.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Well, it has been moved by Councillor Abbott and seconded by Councillor Mrs Spray that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, and thank you for those attending. We now come to the next application, which is application 5C, application 22007222HH, 23 Oates Cottages, Sudbury Road, Gestingthorpe, can be found on pages 92 to 104. I do not have any speakers on this application. We'll go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Sam.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm here
Could you just wait a sec, let people go? It's a bit noisy, I can't. Thank you. Good night. Sorry, Sam.
Sorry. So I'm here to present a planning application for a site known as 23 Oates Cottages, located just outside of Gestingthorpe. The application seeks retrospective planning permission for a garden shed. This is the site location plan of the application site outlined in red up here. Just for some context, this shows the other side the site location plan didn't show, so this is the relationship to the village of Gestingthorpe with the recreation ground down here. The site basically is a form of ribbon development. It terminates the ribbon development out of Gestingthorpe, and it's outlined in a red circle there. This is a site layout plan, so this shows the position of the garden shed within the curtilage of the dwelling. It's the front elevation, so it's actually sort of facing the side boundary, facing number 22 Oates Cottages. The maximum height of the building is 3 metres. You'll see in a second it's got an asymmetrical eaves, and we'll talk about that in a second. In total, it's 6.89 metres in length. And this is that asymmetrical eave, so the overall height to the eaves itself, which faces the other neighbour, is 1.72 metres. And then this is the elevation which faces out towards the field at the back of the site. And the rear elevation, so this is the elevation that faces towards number 24 Oates Cottages. Onto some photographs. So this is a photo of the outbuilding itself. And this is a photo taken from basically the rear elevation of 23 Oates Cottages looking towards the building. Just shows the relationship between the outbuilding and the neighbouring property at number 22 Oates Cottages. In a photo it shows the relationship between the outbuilding and the other neighbour at number 24 Oates Cottages. Also shows the distance there between the shed and the existing dwelling. And that's the rear elevation of the dwelling itself, 23 Oates Cottages. And that photo shows the relationship between the lowered eaves and the boundary of number 24 Oates Cottages. So to summarise, this application represents a retrospective planning application for a domestic outbuilding which has been built without planning permission. Permission was required because permitted development rights were removed from the development when it was approved planning permission back in the noughties. Class E relates to the provision of new outbuildings, and that was specifically taken away. Saying that it's not reasonable for householders to have ancillary outbuildings in their gardens. And in this case, although it's large, it's considered to be reasonable in terms of its size and appropriate in its design and appearance. Obviously, it's considered that the character of the plot is not compromised. And whilst we acknowledge there are some impacts to neighbouring residential amenities due to the building size and position, these are not considered to be unacceptable, which would warrant withholding planning permission in this case. And therefore, to conclude, officers consider that the retention of the outbuilding as constructed complies with the Council's local plan policies, and therefore approval is recommended. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sam. Actually, members, this is in my ward, and I'm going to make the unusual time for speaking. This was a small, affordable development. It took an awful lot of time getting this approved. There were so many villagers against it. And one of the main concerns was keeping it open over the fields, and the person that actually gave the land was really quite keen that this would be kept open. And we spent many, many months with the developers trying to get this site right, so that when people looked out of the windows, they didn't overlook garages, buildings, and things like that. That's why the permitted development rights were removed, and I was quite upset to see that we can suddenly change our mind when we were so emphatic at the time in 2007 that this was how we wanted the site to remain. I just wanted to say that. I'll throw it open to members now. Councillor Abbott.
I was a bit intrigued as to why it came to committee, to be honest, Madam Chairman. It says on top of page 97 that it's is deemed to be significant by the Planning Development Manager. I'm assuming that is because of the breach of PD, primarily. Is that right? Yeah.
So thank you for the question, Councillor Abbott. So obviously we can refer any application to Planning Committee. I think in this case, it's obviously, it's a retrospective application. There are sort of neighbour amenity concerns, issues that have been flagged. It's retrospective, which is never good, and yeah, we thought it was probably a good one to have an hearing at Planning Committee because of the finely balanced nature of the proposal. So we sort of recognised the difference of views on this particular one, so we thought we would refer it to Planning Committee for that reason.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. I mean, the second thing is the description of a shed. As an owner of a lot of sheds, I would not describe that as a shed. It's an outbuilding or a cabin, but it's not a garden shed. But, it's some subjectivity in there, I recognise it. It's a difficult one because obviously it is it's quite a big building in a relatively small plot. I think what goes in its favour is it's quite well designed with the roof at the back is a very shallow pitch as it comes down to the fence line, but then again it's very close to the boundary. Yeah, I'm in two minds about this one. I'll see what others think.
Councillor Starker.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Abbott. I wouldn't describe it as a garden shed with patio doors and so on. I think for me the two issues, one that's really bothering me is one of the issues that's raised by the residents is the issue about the drainage of this quite substantial portion of roof. Where does the water go? I think there have been issues with is it going straight onto the neighbour's garden? And then really I think for me this issue is an issue of looking at the policy and which is helpfully set out in the report. But so many of these things are quite subjective. There should be no overdevelopment of the plot when taking account the footprint of the existing dwelling. There should be no unacceptable adverse impacts, including an overbearing impact. The property design, citing bulk, etc., should be compatible with the original dwelling. I mean, I do sort of wonder whether this is actually sort of falling on the wrong side of some of those aspects of our policy. I wonder if the officer could comment on those points, please.
So picking up the point of drainage first, that was one of the reasons I included a picture of the eaves. I'll just share that again if that's okay. Because it does have an asymmetrical eaves, when it loads, there we go. Because it has got an asymmetrical eaves, the actual eaves itself is quite low in comparison to the boundary fence, so some of the water may well tip over into the neighbour's boundary. There is no guttering there, but it's more than likely, I would suggest, that it's going to fall between that gap. To the other side, obviously, if I go back, there is sufficient distance there that there wouldn't be flooding. There's also a very slight change in levels on the site. It slopes very slightly downward toward the rear of the site, so if there was any water, it would slope the other way rather than towards the houses. In respect of the other points, whether the outbuilding is a little bit too large, like we said in the presentation, the report is perhaps a balanced decision. Officers consider that when applying the policy and carrying out that assessment, it does tip in favour of approving the application. But I appreciate, yes, it is a fine balance.
Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm just really worried that as part of this section of housing along there, once this one goes, how many more are going to come forward? And then effectively the view, and I do note that actually it's also seen from Nether Hill as well, and I do know this area quite well in this development. And also, I agree with Councillor Parker that there's a bit of a fine balance here, really. And it's very close to the boundary. But what I'm really worried about is that if this one goes through, then there is going to be a precedent set for all of those gardens. And then would the next planning application coming in, would that be even larger? And what basis would we have to refuse that? So I think overall, the way that the property was developed and designed, and taking into account, Madam Chairman, what you said about when it was originally designed and built, part of the charm of it was the fact it was going to keep open gardens. So actually, I would like to overturn the recommendation and say that actually, because it's so finely balanced, and because I'm worried about the President, because I'm worried about the view, because I'm worried about further applications coming in being even larger, and because I think it's important for those residents that are there that they can have that view going out the back, and that's my reasons for putting that forward.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Abbott.
Yes, I'll second that, Madam Chairman. I think, a useful debate, and also going back through the individual clauses in that policy, I think actually there is enough in there. Several of those would apply, so I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, again, I'm on the side of it's a bit of a fine balance of this one. We remove permitted development rights for specific reasons. I think this is one of them. It doesn't quite fall on the element of a garden or a typical garden shed at the bottom of your garden where you would store a bike or some garden tools, etc. This is a purpose-built extension to the, or not extension to the home, but a separate dwelling or separate place where it's not quite falling under that kind of ancillary shed that you would have or find typical in a village like Gestingthorpe. Like I said, we removed permitted development rights for a reason, and I think this is a justifiable reason. So I'd be happy to support the new motion to refuse this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I got a feeling you wanted to say something. I'm beginning to get telepathic.
Thank you, Councillor Scattergood. So if I could just come back, Councillor Schweer, just in terms of the reasons. I was scribbling away as best I could, but just obviously before members take a vote on it, just to be clear in terms of the grounds for refusal. So what I've taken from your concerns, Councillor Schweer, is it's primarily in relation to the visual impact of this in terms of the openness at the back, the impact potentially through establishing this as an acceptable form of development that could be replicated on the adjacent plots. I didn't get a sense that the concern was more about the neighbouring amenity impact, but it'd be useful just to clarify that point. And I suppose just in terms of the overall size of it, is that a concern in relation to the plot? I'm just thinking about the specific criteria within policy LPP 36, so on page 99 of the agenda. I just want to make sure we're clear on the specific areas of harm that you want to identify, so that could be captured within a reasoned refusal if members did refuse it.
Overdevelopment.
I think all of those reasons, but also because it was going against the development rights as well. I think that was an important factor. And also, as you mentioned about all of the neighbourhoods, the size as well, and the views.
A lot of these apply, don't they? G.
Had a chance to read 99.
A. B. C. Yes, I think the majority from A down to H. Does anyone else wish to add anything else before I put this to vote? Well, it has been moved and seconded that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? start again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? Abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you very much. That application has been refused. Now brings us to the final application this evening, which is 5D, application 22020844, full Neighbourhood Centre, Towerlands, Panfield Road, Braintree. And I do have a speaker on this application. Thank you. It's Mr. Andrew Owen who is speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name is Andrew Owen, and I'm the planning manager at Dandara, responsible for the delivery of this application. The proposal before you seeks planning permission for the neighbourhood centre at our flagship Towlands site in Braintree. The site benefits from outline planning permission for 575 new homes, a neighbourhood centre and an education site. The first phase of 168 homes was approved in April this year, and we launched our sales area at the weekend. We've also completed a 3.5 hectare ecology zone, and an application for 162 further homes in phase 2 is currently pending determination. The neighbourhood centre itself is required to deliver up to 250 square metres of A1 retail space and D1 community space. The outline planning permission includes a design code and parameter plans, which have established the key design principles and character areas for future applications to accord with. As a company, Dandara is new to the Essex area, with our eastern region being established 12 months ago. Following the acquisition of the Towlands site, we continue to grow and remain committed to investing in Braintree. Internally, we identified an opportunity for our regional headquarters to be delivered within the Towlands site as part of the neighbourhood centre, and through consultation with council officers have secured support in principle for this proposal. The neighbourhood centre itself forms the focal point of the site, and we have designed it to complement the approved homes on the opposite side of the avenue character area within phase 1. At ground floor level, retail and community units are provided within a traditional shop front design, prioritising the key function of the space. Externally, high quality block paving will create interest, and areas of tree planting and new hedgerows will frame the space and deliver an attractive environment. We have allowed for areas for external seating to promote opportunities for people to meet and converse, which will help establish the new community. Through design meetings with council officers, we've evolved the proposals to include projecting brick gables interspersed with elements of render to break up the scale and massing and articulate the roofscape. To the rear of the building is a car park with 58 spaces above the minimum standards and includes disabled bays and electric vehicle charging points. Access to the office itself is via the rear elevation, ensuring that the community and retail use at the front of the building is prioritised. Impacts on the local transport network have been assessed, and Essex Highways have no objection to this application. Indeed, there are no objections from any statutory consultees. Dandara welcomes the positive comments on the design within the committee report and would like to thank officers for their time discussing these proposals. We hope that you vote to approve the application in accordance with your officer's recommendation, and we look forward to working with the Council on the delivery of this scheme and identifying an operator of the community space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I have no other speakers on this application, so we go to the application which is going to be presented by Mel. Thank you, Mel.
This application is seeking full planning permission. Oh, sorry, I did it again. So this application is seeking full planning permission for the creation of a mixed-use building at the neighbourhood centre, comprising of retail and community uses on the ground floor and office use on the upper floors. There would also be an associated car parking, hard and soft landscaping and a recycling centre. And this is at the strategic Towlands site off of Panfield Lane. So members will hopefully be aware of the Towlands site. So we have Deanery Hill running along the top right-hand side here, and then Panfield Lane running down here. The application site is this red square in the bottom right-hand corner here. And then the remainder of the site is the various different portions and the different phases that will come forward. And as mentioned by Mr Owen, this is the ecological land, which members may remember coming to committee earlier this year. The next slide shows an aerial shot. So this is a little bit out of date in terms of the site is coming forward. I have got some more up-to-date photographs taken on Friday, but this puts the site in context with Deanery Hill, and then you can just make out here the existing BMX site, and then you've got Panfield Lane running down here, and the existing residential developments here. So the next few slides show the layout of the application site. So at the front here is the community building. So this is an aerial shot clearly, and then you can see that the car parking is proposed at the back. There are actually two different car parks within this site. So the one that's accessed here would be for the community use and the retail use, and also for access for serving one of the required recycling centres within the wider Towland site. The access down here, which would be only available for the office users, accesses this portion of the car parking here. So it does look like it's one whole car parking space, but they actually do have separate entrances and will then operate separately. On this plan as well, you can see the areas around the building, and as mentioned, there is a proposal for spaces to have outside seating, if required, depending on who the end users are. A later plan will also show in detail some of the landscape and soft and landscaping details that have been put forward. So this plan here shows the hard landscaping proposed. There is a mix and a proposed mix of pavias proposed around the building in various shades of grey to provide different context surrounding the building, and then to the rear we've then got the surfaced car parking. This slide here shows you the proposed, particularly the tree planting within the car park to the rear. The next slide will show you some more detail to do with the planters around the front, but this plan here particularly shows you that there is going to be tree planting within the car park to visually mitigate against the number of car parking spaces proposed. So this plan here shows you the detail in terms of the planters that would be proposed along the frontage of the site, the detail of the tree planting within the car park, and on the bottom here is the paving palette that is proposed to surround the building. There was fairly lengthy discussion about the paving, so I hope members agree that it's a suitable palette to run around the building. The next few slides are actually concept drawings to show the building, how it would sit within the wider street scene. Clearly the site isn't that far forward yet, so I haven't got any photographs to show what it would look like. So hopefully these drawings will give you an idea of what the building potentially will look like once it's completed. So this is an image of the front of the building. And much time was spent by officers and the applicant achieving the design of particularly the frontage, which then hopefully centres the eye on the ground floor uses, which officers view are the important elements of the community building because of the function that they will play in the future. So this one's an interesting one because it shows it in context with the houses on the other side of the avenue. And so hopefully you can make out that the roof design of the new neighbourhood centre has been designed to mirror and have that same roof feature. So there is then some continuity across the road. This is looking from the other side of the building. So again, you can just make out the houses further along the avenue, looking towards the east. And this is the view from the rear. Across the car park to the back of the property, where there would be access doors for the retail and community uses, but also then the main access is to access the offices on the first and second floors. The next slide just shows you the elevations in 2D form. So again, you can make out that there has been a fair amount of time was spent on the individual elements of the building in terms of creating interest and relief between various elements. And then we've got the floor plans here. So 2 floors of open plan office space, and then on the ground floor we have retail use at one end of the building and the community uses at the other. There's a substation that's provided in the bottom of the site. And then these are the photographs that I was referring to. So this is where the actual neighbourhood centre will be going. So you can just make out that the foundations have been put in for some of the houses that would sit beyond it. Hopefully the next few photographs will put it more in context. So again, where my cursor is where the neighbourhood centre will go. But you can see that the houses, particularly on the bottom corner of the site, so particularly where it's most visible from Deanery Hill or the junction of Deanery Hill and Panfield Lane, they are now starting to be built out and completed. And I thought this was a useful photograph because then members could see where the neighbourhood centre sits within, particularly its close proximity to one of the main entrances into the site. The next photograph there is just another photograph of, I think these are the show homes, that's correct. And then you can just make out the neighbourhood centre would sit behind here. And you can just make out here the foundations that are going in for the houses that will be built to one side. I just wanted to provide a short update on the legal agreements that have been set out within your the agenda. Drafting is underway, and we're hoping to progress those as soon as possible. But I think most of the key areas have been agreed. It's just getting the final drafting sorted and in agreement between both sides. So to conclude, the principle of the development has been established at the outline stage. There's been no objections from any statutory technical consultees. Officers consider that the appearance, landscaping, layout and the scale of the proposals are considered acceptable and represents a well-designed scheme that does then deliver the neighbourhood centre. Therefore, I'm going to read this out because it gets a bit complicated. So, therefore, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the Section 106 to cover the heads of terms outlined within the recommendation section of the committee report. Amendments to the Section 106 attached to the outline planning permission for the wider Towland site, also set out within the recommendation section of the report, and then subject to the conditions and reasons and informative set out within Appendix 1 of the committee report. That's the end of the presentation, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mel. Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really like this. I think it's a great addition to what's already turning out to be a great development up at that end of the town. I think the consideration given to ensuring that it blends in with the proposed existing housing development lends itself really well for it to become a focal point within that new development. And I particularly like the fact that we've got some consideration for a community facility there. I think it's really key and important to consider this at this stage of development rather than just bringing on further houses as a planning application. So I commend the developer for achieving that. I think it's great that it's going to be in a spot where it's close to the BMX track as well. I think as you kind of start to develop that area there, it becomes a bit more inclusive at that corner of the town too. Overall, I'd be more than happy to support officers' recommendations to approve this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Are you actually moving it?
I am, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Does it find a seconder? Councillor Mann, you did indicate you wish to speak as well.
I've watched with interest this site because it's the only one of our key sort of projects in Bucking Northwark that is in fact taking shape. Both Panfield Lane and Straits Mill having stalled to say the least. So it's good to see this coming alive in the form that it is. I agree with what's been reported and said. This does appear to be a very well-designed scheme. I mean, it sort of straddles the avenue and lane zone, and it particularly picks up on sort of details of the avenue proposed residential development, and does so well. I think it, the building should be quite remarkable as a neighbourhood centre. We've seen some neighbourhood centres in our time on the committee, and they are not always to this standard. I think it's also a move in the right direction to give floors 2 and 3 to office use, to be preferred, I think, to residential, which was, I think, in the original plans that we saw. So, yeah, very happy to second and support this in any way.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mr. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 comments to me. I think this is a really interesting design, and I mean that in an entirely good way. I like that the roof line mirrors that of the houses opposite. You know, that might seem like a fairly obvious thing, but I don't necessarily think it is. I think, some real thought has gone into that. I think it's also pleasing that the developer are actively engaging with the district. They're not just developing at arm's length. And if I got it right from what Mr. Owen said, there's a proposal that they might locate their regional office within the site eventually. So I think that's very commendable too. So yeah, I'm extremely happy to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, it is refreshing to see a design like that. I must say it does look attractive, and the street line trees government requirement, I think if those trees do end up growing like that, will be met. And there's enough space for them as well, which I think is really important. I'm assuming there's no renewable energy, though. I don't think you said anything in the report. I just wanted to flag, in relation to that, 2 things I've researched recently. One is talking to the government. They say they think that by 2025, most new buildings, commercial and housing, will have renewable energy included, including solar panels. So, and also as a member of the Climate Commission, as Councillor Suarez, via building regulation, this is via building regulations, they're expecting passive house standards in Essex within the same period. So I'm just very interested to see how we're going to get from where we are now, nearly in 2023, to there in just 2 years' time, because we're still having developments like this coming forward, as I say, unless someone can tell me otherwise, with no renewable energy. Just 2 questions. I'm going to support it, by the way. 2 questions. One is just a bit intrigued about the paragraphs towards the bottom of page 112 where they talk about wastewater. I know what foul drainage is. I know what surface water disposal is, and I'm assuming that goes to SUDS on this site.
So what page was it?
Bottom of 112.
So is that paragraph 714?
712 to 714, yeah. So I know what, obviously, the waste foul drainage goes to the sewage farm. The surface water disposal, I'm assuming that's to SUDS on site.
Yeah.
This, what is used water network? Is that water from sinks and taps as opposed to toilets? Sorry to ask the question, but I'm just intrigued. And it goes to the sewer, so presumably it goes to the same place as the waste, the foul does. Is that right? Have I got it right?
I think that interpretation, Councillor Roberts, is correct.
Yeah, just clarifying.
I think.
Because I can't see it broken down into three before that.
Yeah, the surface water goes into the subs and then everything else would go.
So we're going to need another system through the Climate Change Commission for dealing with that total water. Final question is recycling centre. I'm intrigued as to know what that is. Is it a recycling facility for the building, for the wider area? Is it private? Is it going to be collected as part of the BDC system? Just intrigued. Thank you.
Okay, so within the original outline application, there is, and within the design code, the parameter plans, and the Section 106 agreement for the outline application, there is a requirement for the provision of 2 recycling centres on the site. And I think within the Section 106, it actually also mentions there's some square meterage or footprints in terms of the sizes that they need to be. So within this application, that is delivering one of those requirements. So the other one will then be provided when one of the other phases comes forward. What's envisaged is that it's a publicly accessible space, and it will contain the types of recycling facilities that you see at supermarkets, in terms of newspapers, magazines, clothes, shoes, those types of things that you often see on the edge of supermarket car parks. And that's what's envisaged for that area. So that's why you haven't got any elevations of an actual building, because they will be the types of containers that get moved in and out once they're full. But that will then be available for anyone who lives on the site. I suppose if you're a regular visitor to the retail unit, or if you're a regular worker in one of the offices, you'd be able to use that. So it won't be just limited to the people within the application site. It will be for anyone within the town and site and anyone nearby.
Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to carry on from the comments on about the used water network, I'm a little bit concerned about that the development on the site and that Anglian Water are expected and obligated to take that. I know that it's not within the planning parameters, but are officers assuming that work will be those engineering works will be taken in advance to take those flows without any spillage on the site as it develops? I know it's a bit technical, but I just like their interest on that, please.
So my understanding, Councillor Schweer, is as a statutory body, they're obliged to take those flows. So once a decision has been made on the application and they know the development is coming forward, they then have to provide for it effectively. So it's not a matter, as you say, in terms of planning. I think the statutory constantly there is just flagging up that there could be an implication there in terms of taking those flows, but they would have to provide for them effectively.
Thank you. Councillor Spark.
Sorry, at the risk of adding this, I'd just like to add my compliments on the design of the building. I think the roof line in particular is funny enough, for a 3-storey building, quite a substantial building. I feel it seems to be quite a sort of gentle building. I think it's a really super design, and really will complement the whole site. Yes, I hope that succeed in finding someone to use the community element of it as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, members, it has been moved by Councillor Ritchie and seconded by Councillor Mann that we approve this application. All those in favour? Well, that is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our planning items. Chris, did you want to mention the 10th of January, or is that just not yet? Okay. The 20th of December is still on, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, and I will close the meeting at 9:04. Thank you very much indeed. Good night, and thank you to all the officers.